I went through a lot of changes as a teenager where I was real quirky, and when I was younger, uh, I had just the weirdest hobbies. Like I would ride a unicycle to school, for instance. I was a bird watcher. I played the violin, things like this. Not like as far removed from tough guy stuff as possible. Uh, and then I started getting into sports when I was right around 14. I started wrestling. And I stunk bad, but I stuck with it. I mean, I didn't win anything my first year, not a single match. I wrestled the whole season. Uh, the second year, in my 10th grade, I won one match, and I liked that feeling, of victory. You know what I mean? It was a newfound sensation to me, one that I'd never had before. That kind of victory, being victorious, mano a mano against one other person. So I started working hard at that, and I would train over the summer. And at that age, you're really growing. You're growing physically, you're growing mentally, and I was bound and determined to get good at it. I would wrestle with the college athletes, um, and my junior and senior year, I was very good. My senior year, I couldn't be beaten. I broke records in like takedowns, pins, and points. Um, and I liked that feeling of both teamwork and being self-driven, because when you're on a wrestling team, of course you're working to support the team and make points for the team and stuff like that. But you want your own stats and your own victories. In order to get that, you have to do more than just practice with the team. You've got to be self-governed, self-disciplined. You've got to put in the time and the work, outside of just after school. And I wanted more of that. And I think I started thinking about the military when I was 16. When I was 17, I went to the recruiter. So I was still I wasn't old enough to join, but I went to the recruiters, and they had a delayed entry program thing. But I went to all of the recruiters, and I kind of interviewed them. I asked each one of them, "Hey, what's the hardest thing I could do?" And that was basically it. I just wanted something very, very hard, and because they all the branches have really hard, challenging uh, schools, courses, selections, tryouts, but the Army at the time had the best answer for me. So that's where it started, and they had a good answer. Uh, they had a plus they had the coolest posters on the wall. They had the coolest, absolute coolest posters. And there was something about the berets, being a green beret, that was so appealing to a young kid. It was like, man, that has got to be the most badass thing ever, to be a green beret. And they had a program at that time in the early mid 80s called the 18 X-ray program, or SF Baby, where I was able to enlist, go to infantry basic training, 13 weeks, go to jump school, and then go right to the special forces course. So that's the route I took.
Oh wow. Okay. So, well, what was basic training like compared to special forces training?
Oh, nothing compared. The thing is, I mean, basic training is just a culture shock for a kid. That's all it is. Because you don't know any of that stuff when you're a kid. 18 years old, all you know is high school, study, this and that. So I mean, it's just meant to be a culture shock, and most of it's theater. A lot of yelling and screaming, get up, get down, do push-ups, run faster, that kind of thing. Where you're never pass an inspection, you never run fast enough. It's just it's designed, I think, the right way. To be that culture shock. For a young man. I mean, you lose your identity, you shave your head, you all dress the same, that kind of thing. So your identity's been stripped from you too, which is, it's a good process. Special forces training was nothing like that at all. It was a completely different ball of wax.
Well, tell me more about special forces training. What was that like?
Well, it was very the one struggle I had, um because of my age was uh I didn't have the smarts. I didn't have those tools in that toolbox. I had no experience. Most guys going through the special forces course have some kind of experience. They came from infantry units, from ranger battalions, that kind of thing. So they've got all this experience already, where I was drinking through a fire hose because there was a lot of information passing. The physical stuff for me, no problem. I was a young stud. I was bad to the bone. Uh, but the mental aspect of it, and the sleep deprivation and the food deprivation, all that stuff, I never, I, I've never worked in that type of environment ever. So it was, it was a challenging on more, it was challenging on more than one front, but the mental aspect is the one thing that I struggled with big time. I joined in 1983. And 1984, on my birthday, March 4th of 1984, I started the SF course. Happy birthday. um, but the mental stuff was just, you're preparing to make a warfighter. So when you're making a warfighter, you need a certain level of mental aptitude. You can't just be a tough guy. That only goes so far. That really, it's way that's back burner stuff there. You got to have more of this. You've got to understand how to plan a patrol, how to plan an operation, how to write contingency plans, how to delegate authority. You're immediately thrown into leadership positions. And how many leadership positions are 18-year-olds in? Very few. So now, and not only that, but you had to learn all these new terms: foreign internal defense and guerrilla warfare, and in the second phase of it, you specialize in something, and that was schoolhouse, strictly schoolhouse. So I mean, there was a lot there, a lot of studying, a lot of after hours work in that course. So when I graduated, I went to a group. So the group I went to was First Special Forces Group out of Fort Lewis, Washington, and I got assigned to an A team, 12-man A team. And on that team, I was the youngest guy. I was the least amount of experience, all that stuff. Um, so it kind of started all over again, drinking from a fire hose, because it was cross training. You had to know so much. Uh, and I was there for about 3 years, and then I got recruited to go to another unit. Now this is Cold War time, mind you. So the unit I got recruited to go to was based out of Berlin, Germany, and it was like uh, it was another special operations unit where they were setting up like networks for double agents during the Cold War, and they were stay behind force in case the balloon went up, WW3 or some kind of unrest like that. But that was extremely interesting. And then after about 2 years there, I got recruited to go to another unit, and that was spying on the Soviet army in Soviet East Germany. So that one was, I had no idea that any of these things existed, but you you wait and you look around for opportunity, and opportunity doesn't always knock, but sometimes it does. In this case, that opportunity knocked, and I answered, both of those units. And that one was, it was absolutely mind blowing. I had to learn, I had to know German. Before I went to Germany, I went to DLI, Defense Language Institute, and learned German because I had to speak it in both jobs. Yep. So that was, I mean, the start of a long career. And this is still the 80s now. By the time I left Berlin, it was 1991. So I was there when the wall came down, and during reunification, I was there for that whole thing. But once the writing was on the wall that, hey, Cold War's ending, I had to find another job. Where you go from there? You know what I mean? I mean, you think you're at the top of the heap. You've done all this cool stuff. So there was only one other path, and that was to try out for Delta for the unit. So I did that in 1991, and I failed and got invited to go back. So I went back a year later and was went to selection in 1992 and made it, and then OTC, 6 months of operator trainer course.
So going back a little bit, what was it like spying on the Soviets and then towards the end of the Cold War from especially from your point of view?
Yeah, it was the coolest thing ever. We were doing high speed stuff in a low tech world. I mean, there was no technology wasn't there yet, with GPSs and with cell phones and digital stuff. So it was all film, when we were taking pictures, still just film cameras. We were it was it was a big game of cat and mouse because they knew what we were doing, because we had what was called a cover for action, cover for status, being in Soviet East Germany. Our cover for action was that we were a liaison unit to the Soviet army, and they knew that was BS. Uh, but it gave us passage across the Glienicke Brücke and into Potsdam, East Germany. But the warnings were there, don't get caught doing anything but liaison stuff. But that's exactly what we were doing. We were doing everything but liaison stuff. Uh, a lot of intelligence was driven by like satellite imagery and things like that, and then we go to certain areas of the country and try to find out what equipment they're using, uh, unit affiliation, what units are training where. And the neat thing about that unit too was the Soviets issued us maps for all of East Germany. And they had these yellow marked areas on them called PRAs, permanently restricted areas. Now, as you can imagine, that's where all the good stuff was, KGB comms and nuke stuff and all that. So those are the areas we probed, get into those areas. And we would go over there with these vehicles called they were Mercedes Geländewagens, and they were highly modified. And then we'd go with a slew of cameras and video cameras, and just start working it, and we called those tours. We would go for basically 3 days at a whack and rotate 3 days at a whack. And for those 3 days, you're not sleeping. You're just going. You're going. Then you come back and you get like a 5-day break, sleep, refit, and everything. And meanwhile, there's other guys doing the same thing. You kind of rotate through it, so you leave no stone unturned. But yeah, it was fascinating, fantastic, and very, very scary.
Tell me about getting in the Delta Force.
Well, it was that was a whole different world. First off, the selection process is magical. It's not even very hard to describe. Most of it's based off of like orienteering, in the mountains. So navigating and moving from one point on the ground to another. But you have a lot of unknown. You don't know when the days are going to end. You don't know how fast you have to go. You just you're in constant threat of worrying about the unknown, which can get the best of someone if they don't have their wits about them. But once I made it through that, I went through 6 months of operator trainers course, and then yeah, I spent 13 years there, and still to this day I miss it dearly. I retired in 2005, and I miss that place dearly and deeply. You're talking about, I mean, it's a cliche that's overused and abused, but that's literally the tip of the spear. There's no more prestigious and uh, better tier one unit on the planet, not just here in the States, but and then you're working with guys that are all same cut of the cloth, but you're constantly working to try to keep up, because somebody's always better than you are. And that's not a place that accepts mediocrity at all. So you're constantly trying to better yourself. You're showing up early, you're going home late, you're putting in the extra hours. You're working on your craft, you're working on your shooting, on your close quarter battle, on your explosive breaching, on your med, on your comms. There was so much to know, on your driving, on your fighting, all of it. There was just uh, an information overload, and it never stopped. The wheels on the bus go round and round.
What was your first deployment like?
Well, so the '90s were what we still consider peacetime army. You know what I mean? So there wasn't a lot going on, but there wasn't a lot going on as far as the entire military was concerned. But we were always kept employed. They were always putting us into portions of the world where we didn't have complete autonomy. One of the things I got, so I did some of that stuff, but that's not stuff that I'm comfortable disclosing, in detail. But we got active in the Balkans, in Bosnia, and working on capturing the PIFWICs, persons indicted for war crimes. And this was started in like 1998. And I did a bunch of that. And that was it was very, very exciting. It was plain clothes, long hair, track suits, leather jackets, trying to blend in like Eastern Euro trash. And yeah, it was really good stuff. What was it like? To me, it was just exciting. The first several pushes. It was very, very exciting.
Like, would you like snatch and grab the war criminals, or like, what would you
Yes,
do?
yep. Those were snatch and grabs. Yep, yep. Because the thing is, they had to go to the Hague, to go to trial. So it's not like we could dispatch them and make them go away, or even bloody them up, and bust their face open. It had to be very surgical snatching these guys up. Yeah, so it was snatch and grabs. Yep, bingo. Mhm.
So after the Balkans War, what happens with you? Now it's still showing peacetime, but
Well, this is now the '90s, late '90s. Um, I mean, there's always something going on, but of course, 2001, the GWAT kicks off. The global war on terror, and at the time, I was an OTC instructor, so I was instructing, and I'm locked into that position. So all my buds are deploying. They're all going overseas. They're all going to Iraq, Afghanistan, and I'm back with a couple other knuckle draggers training the new operators, which was quite a bummer. So by the time I got over there in '04, my first time, the guys were so experienced, lay of the land, sights and sounds of the battlefield, because they had done hundreds of operations before I got there, hundreds. And so it was very educational from that point of view. Because when I got over to Iraq, I was at E9, so as far as enlisted rank goes, I couldn't go any higher. Um, but the cool thing was I was working in a position that an E6 would do. So I got to, be a door kicker as an E9, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, that was an educational experience. So I did two short trips to Iraq, and then in '05 I retired.
what was Iraq like when you first got there?
Hot, 135 degrees.
And
Um, it was a target rich environment. It was very target rich. In other words, there was always something for us to do. There was always somebody for us to go and police up or get rid of. There was always. Yep. It was the op tempo was very high when I first got there. The operational tempo. But yeah, it was a good eye opener for me. When I got there, the guys were doing, and this blew my mind. I said, "What's your op tempo like?" They said, "We're doing at least one hit every night, and sometimes four a night." So that's how, yeah, that was between like '03 and '06. That was the operation tempo. So, like I said, when I got there, the guys were used to it, and it was a new thing for me. I was mind blown. I was like, oh my God, man. And we even started doing like even like police work, you know, like you scarf up lower level scumbags who can lead you to the bigger dude, you know, that kind of thing. Well, the thing is, we train for everything. So all year long, when we're training for stuff, we have to be, you know, good at our legacy skills: shooting, close quarter battle, fighting, planning, planning operations, all that stuff. We have to be really good at explosive breaching, all that stuff. But also throughout the year, we would do different specialized training, like aircraft training, climbing training, driving training, those kind of things. And then we would do environmental training, you know, winter warfare stuff, jungle warfare, desert ops, mobility training. So we were no strangers. Any environment that we would go to, we were already training in those, because every year you did all those. You did all of those environments every year, you know, at least for a few weeks. You know, and you pick or name the desert or the jungle. You know, I've been to a lot of them in you know, in the training environment.
What was desert warfare like overall?
I didn't we didn't do any desert warfare, so we went house to house. So I didn't do any desert warfare. A lot of guys in like even in Afghanistan, they did like they were doing what a mountain goat does, you know. Yep. So it was just a hot environment to go building to building. That was and even we did most everything at night because we're creatures of the night, right? Because we own the night. And even at night, it would cool down to like 110, you know, in the summertime. But yeah, that was I mean, the desert environment is hard to work in, of course, because of heat and the arid conditions and water. You have to think about all those things, you know. So it's a lot more difficult. There's challenges with every environment you go to. You presented with a whole slew of different challenges, whether it's winter warfare, jungle, desert, doesn't matter. Whole new set.
So how similar was your experience in Iraq compared to when you were in the Balkans?
Completely different. 100% completely different. Yep. In the Balkans, it was more cloak and dagger, you know, snatch operations and stuff. Very little bit of equipment on, plain clothes mostly. So yeah, completely different. But that's another thing. We work in all those environments. We do plain clothes stuff. We do kitted out stuff. So you've got to be able to flex. You know, everything's it's a system of modularity, you know, that you operate with. Your equipment's always different. Your environment's always different. Your operations are always different. And it's just about training, you know, train in all these different environments and all these conditions. I uh I was never in one of those like big, you know, firefights. You know what I mean? You hear about like the big firefights that people write books about. So um for me, it was you go to a house and assault it. So you explosively breach the door, you go in, and you're the mind's going a mile a minute because you've got to be able to discern, discriminate, because you don't want to hurt somebody that doesn't need to be hurt, but there are people that need to be hurt and hurt bad. So you've got to be able to process that information very, very quickly with authority. But discriminate is that's what we get paid for. You know, that's what we're good at. You know, the unit guys, the assaulters there are very, very good at discern, discriminate, and doing hits surgically. You know, it's all about surgical precision versus a big mess, you know, just leveling a building or, you know, blowing up a building or firing it up with a machine gun, you know. It was a neat experience. Especially in that environment, because it got a little during the summer, it's too hot to sleep inside. So the men would sleep outside in the front yards or on the roofs of buildings. So approaching surreptitiously, you know, a building presented us with challenges because people were outside sleeping, and you have to kind of maneuver your way through them and just be ready for somebody to wake up so you could just, you know, Tell them not to. I am very fortunate, to have had the career that I did. But there's a lesson I like to share with people, especially younger people. Um, when I was going through the Special Forces course, there was no way in hell that I was going to make it on my own accord without assistance from peers with experience. No way. Now, I didn't know that, how hard it was going to be. But what I did know is that I had extraordinary work ethic. So when any kind of crap detail came down, like, hey, we need two people to do this detail, my hand was always raising, always raising, always raising. Now, what that did was show the older guys, the staff sergeants, the E7s, guys from Ranger Battalion, from 82nd Airborne Division, what showed them is this young kid has good work ethic. He's not afraid of getting his hands dirty. He's not afraid of putting in the extra hours. So they took me under their wing and mentored me through the process, which, like I said, had I not had that assist, I wouldn't have made the Special Forces course. But that mentality what traveled with me everywhere I went. Never be afraid of the work. Never be afraid of the extra work too. The extra work, because number one, it just builds character and it proves that you have good character and work ethic. But the other thing, like for me, it saved my butt. Having good work ethic. The other thing is that I like to tell people, man, I failed so many times. I failed in jump school. I got injured. I failed in the Special Forces course. I failed in combat dive school. I failed out of selection. And the list goes on. Each one of those I avenged. I went back. If I was given another opportunity, I was going back and avenging that. The thing is with failure, we are designed to fail, we human beings. It is a biological requirement for development, for proper development. But when we do fail, we need to learn from the past, prepare for the future, perform in the present. We can't let failure become a recurring theme, and we need to have the ability to fail quickly. In other words, don't spend all day failing. Spend a very short amount of time failing. Fail quickly. Get over it. Water off a duck's behind. Get your head back into the mix. So those are big lessons learned that I like to tell people. And it doesn't have to be, I like to tell younger people that stuff. Now, it doesn't matter if they're going to join the military or not, because you could use those lessons in anything, It just so happens that I had a lot of those, and I am a better person for it. I wouldn't take any of it back.
What was it like when you finally retired from the military?
It was a mixed bag of emotions. There was a time where I just felt out of place, so therefore I felt out of sorts because I didn't have good purpose and meaning. Because anywhere I was at the military, I had meaning, I had purpose, I meant something. I was working for the greater good. I was part of the machine, man. I was a agent of correction. Once I retired and I was doing training stuff, I kind of, you kind of lose purpose and meaning. So that took a minute for me to adjust to, and I adjusted accordingly. And then since 2010, I've just been on my own, working on my own.